mythological hero Achilles. Okay. Show me.
I'll solve.
Yeah.
Mythological hero Achilles.
Yeah, that's it.
Your kingdom must come down. Saying your kingdom must come down. I heard the voice of Jesus cry. Saying your kingdom must come down. Your kingdom down. Pray.
I say what? Ho, this is Brian. Call me A. Chili's Gardener, coming to you from Ramble On Tower's Dungeon Studio in scenic Hesper, Ontario. And you are listening to Ramble On Radio, episode number 55, the Big Double Nickel. Ramble On Radio is the only dedicated Led Zeppelin podcast on this or any other known internets. Be sure to go to rambleonradio.com for all your Led Zeppelin news, any links I might mention during the show. You can subscribe to Ramble On Radio through iTunes, and if you go to iTunes, leave a review. There's a chance to leave a review, or if you subscribe through iTunes, go over, leave a review. It helps put us on it bumps you up the listing when people search. You can listen on Spreaker, and be sure to follow Ramble On Radio on Spreaker. Same kind of thing. More people follow, the more it's not listens that they kind of track, it's follows. And check it out at I Am Brian Dammit on YouTube. Follow Ramble On Radio on Facebook, Google Plus, and Ramble On Blog on Twitter. And that's right, I said it's A. Chili's Gardener, the great penguin god with a bad flipper. That intro piece, you heard it, the intro piece was from Wheel of Fortune last week when Indiana University freshman Julian Batts, and if you're not in the U.S., this confuses people. A freshman is a first-year student. It goes freshman, sophomore, junior, senior. That's first, second, third, and fourth year. And so Indiana University freshman Julian Batts, he had all the tiles turned, the entire puzzle solved. It was no letters left to turn. He had picked up $1 million tile off the wheel, another one for a trip to London, and all he had to do was read the puzzle, and he got it wrong. It was mythological hero Achilles. You heard it. You heard the beginning. If you didn't, go back to the beginning when this is over. Don't stop now, but go back to listen to the beginning again. He pronounced it Achilles, and he got the big buzzer instead of the $1 million in the trip to London. Which proves once and for all, this proves beyond a shadow of a doubt, listen to Led Zeppelin, win $1 million. It's that simple. That is the lesson in this. There's $1 million out there to be won if only you're a Led Zeppelin fan. Because a Led Zeppelin fan would never, ever, ever have gotten that one wrong. Quite frankly, a university student shouldn't have either. But, you know, you got to give some allowances for nerves, I think. And underplaying that, and the rest of what you heard in the intro, was Robert Plant this Sunday at the Silhillians Sports Club. And it was, I have no idea what, I've seen that clip, and that's all I've seen on it. It's not like the charity thing at the church last week when there was some articles and whatnot about what it was. He just seemed to be in the Midlands and got up and did some songs, and he was performed Satan, Your Kingdom Must Come Down there. That's the only clip I've seen, is that 1 minute that you heard. But that was what that was. Okay, so this week, if you haven't already got it, or if you haven't heard, the Led Zeppelin released Good Times, Bad Times / Communication Breakdown from the Paris Olympia in 1969. This is one of the bonus tracks from the first album. and they've pre-released it. They've released it ahead of the album as a single, I guess. That was this week. It's available to download on iTunes. It's available to download on Amazon. You can listen to it if you're a Spotify. You can find it. And what's happening is when you check the pre-order on iTunes, it gives the listing of the songs, but it does not have the track, the length of the tracks, except one on each album right now. On the first album, it is this track, this bonus track. It's got the time for it. On the second album, it's Whole Lot of Love, alternate mix with vocals. On the third album, it's Immigrant Song, alternate mix with vocals, I think it is. And so they have their time listed on it, which tells us something. It tells us that those three are being released ahead of the rest of the album. That iTunes has already got those tracks. And the word is that in 2 weeks' time, that's 2 weeks from when they released Good Times, Bad Times, Communication Breakdown, which was this Tuesday, the 15th, 14th if you're in Europe, 15th here in America, is when it was released. So 2 weeks from now, 2 weeks from that date, The Whole Lot of Love is supposed to be released, and presumably 2 weeks after that will be Immigrant Song. None of that's confirmed, but I'm hearing. I mean, you can make certain projections at a certain point when you see those three tracks listed. You can presume, and they've already released one of those tracks. You can presume the other two are getting a release. But I have heard a source says that that in fact the second one, The Whole Lot of Love, will be released on that date in 2 weeks. So that would be, I don't know, my glass is close and I can't see the thing from here, but that would be like the last Monday, Tuesday in April, 28th, 29th. Yeah, that was the date, and then it was something like the 13th of May. 10th, 11th, 12th, 13th of May, and would be the third one. So we have some stuff to look forward to. So I downloaded and I listened to, of course, Good Times, Bad Times, Communication Breakdown from Paris LP. It's an exceptional performance. They really, it is a good, if you listen to the bootleg, go to YouTube and search that concert. Oh, forgive me for I yawn. It is a good concert. So, they are quite hot, as they are most of 1969. They are quite on fire and quite hot. And it is, so it's really cleaned up. It's really clear sounding. And I don't think, I listened to it on the headphones, and I was kind of I don't think it's in stereo. And a lot of people are going, is it a stereo recording? Is it another mono recording? I seen somebody on Steve Hoffman forum saying after listening to it, yeah, it's in stereo. But to my ear, it was not in stereo. It was in mono, which I don't care. I'm fine with that. It's 1969, for God's sakes. Not everything was recorded in stereo, and some people have to get over some ideas that, in 1969, they weren't Led Zeppelin. Led Zeppelin. They weren't that guy. And actually, I'm reviewing a book this week for you, and the Lisa Robinson one, actually, and this is actually something that's mentioned in the book, and wonder if I can find it really pronto quick. Yes, here we go. From 1973, she's referencing when she first seen them. Somewhere around that neighborhood anyway. She says, of course now, nearly 40 years later, Led Zeppelin is almost universally considered the greatest and one of the most innovative trying to do the British way, innovative hard rock bands of all time. But at that time, Jesus, I need my glasses. But at that time, this was not the majority opinion. And that's, so we think of them as having all this, so much at their disposal. Now, if you're going to record a concert, record it in stereo, for crying out loud. But it was a big deal to record a concert in stereo in 1969. And they were not a huge band yet. They were a growing band. And so, they got what they got. So if there's not a stereo recording, it's not the band's fault. Suck it up, that's... it's not the band's fault. What can you say about that? It's but people are all uptight about it. Oh my God, it's not even a stereo recording. Well, it's not. It's just not. It's not what it is. Anyway, so that's out there. The other two are coming. It sounds great, and I thought I'd run through that and mention that before I get to holding it up for the microphone for you all to hear. There Goes Gravity, A Life in Rock and Roll by Lisa Robinson. I mentioned last week that I had requested a review copy of the book, and they said, yeah, no problem, and asked for my address. And then, this is Penguin, by the way, so I got to give a shout out to Penguin Canada. Thank you very much for getting the book to me. So, like I said, I mentioned it was when I recorded last week on the Thursday. I mentioned the night earlier, or the day earlier, I had sent an email, and they had said they would send it out. So on the Wednesday of last week, I requested the book. On Thursday and Wednesday evening, actually, I recorded the podcast. Thursday, I got home from work and put the podcast up. And the book was already here. So I have had the weekend. I've read it. I actually finished reading it last night. But the bulk of what concerns us happens in the second chapter. But I'll talk about that kind of in a minute. So that's what I got. And what I have is an uncorrected proof for limited distribution. If you go to the Facebook page, Ramble On Radio on Facebook, I did post a picture of it last Thursday. I should probably post one on Twitter too, shouldn't I? But it is, yes, an uncorrected proof for limited distribution. There Goes Gravity, A Life in Rock and Roll, Lisa Robinson. It's and it says on the back, like, it's no pictures in it. There is no pictures. And on the inside it says, and this is important, this is key because I'm going to not do this. These are uncorrected advanced proofs bound for your reviewing convenience. In quoting from this book for reviews or any other purpose, please refer to the final printed book, as the author may make changes on these prints before it goes to press. So if I quote something that's not in the final book, I apologize to you, the listener. I apologize to Lisa Robinson. But the final book's not out yet. So this is what I have to work with. But I understand that. It's possible that something I say here is not valid by the time you read the book. Which, by the way, if you're a rock fan overall, if you're a Led Zeppelin fan only, it's a pick'em. I never thought about this before I'm getting here. So just you as a Led Zeppelin fan, you're sitting back. There's a significant chapter that is about traveling with Led Zeppelin, and then they come up here and there throughout. But really, you're looking at the significant chapter. I'd call it a toss. I really would call it a pick'em. If you're in the bookstore and you go, oh, maybe this is interesting. If you're a big Stones fan as well, then it gets a little more. She has chapters basically on her relationship with the Stones, Led Zeppelin, John Lennon, David Bowie, the punk movement of the late 1970s, which she is a big part of. I'm trying to think. Yeah, John Lennon and, the Beatles themselves. Michael Jackson. And to me, the last half of the book, she kind of goes off track a little more, less interesting to me. It gets into Michael Jackson, Lady Gaga, rap. And she's quite into, she's quite, she discovered rap late. Let's put that, but she loves it. So she's a big Kanye West fan. She's a big Jay-Z fan. She's a big Lady Gaga fan. She is a Michael Jackson fan. So if you're thinking, so it gets tough. If you're a rock fan or if a music fan overall, this is a must read. If you're a rock fan, now I'm presuming you're not listening to this because you're a Lady Gaga fan. You may be a rock fan. I presume you're not a rap fan. So I'm not going to go and say if you're a rap fan, buy it or don't buy it. If you're a rock fan, I think it's worth getting. It's well written. It's an interesting book. If you're specifically looking for a Led Zeppelin book, or if you're specifically looking for a Rolling Stones book, if you're specifically looking for a John Lennon book, that's much less clear. As a Led Zeppelin fan, I enjoyed the book up until when I didn't enjoy the book. How's that? Yeah, I mean, it just goes off, about halfway through it starts going off into artists I have a lot less interest in. Let's go there. But it's not uninteresting. And the theme that runs through it is, the thread that connects them all is A, her love of the music, and she finds real art, real passion, real meaning in the music of the artist she's covering in this. And she's quite dismissive. And to say she does, oh, well, she must like everybody, she's quite dismissive of some. Kiss, for one. Kiss she refers to as clowns. Clowns playing New York Dolls music. Or clowns who stole New York Dolls songs. Something along those lines. It was... And she saw them very early on. Like pre-record contract, you know? And she just thought they were a joke. And being a big insider in the New York scene, especially CBGBs and Studio 54, she was familiar with the New York Dolls very well, and bands like that we really don't know unless you were there. They haven't left their mark in the greater public. So I thought I just saw something. So she is dismissive of some. I'm trying to think. There was another one that Madonna. She has no time for. Madonna. She's very dismissive of. But she looks for passion in music. She looks for anger. She looks for something, right? And she finds it in these various disparate acts. And she's actually quite discouraged in rock and roll heading into the 90s when quietly she discovers rap and Eminem specifically. Yes, and there's a chapter on Eminem. And it's the passion in the music, and it's the intensity and the anger that appeals to her, you know, and it's the same thing in the rock and roll, and it's the same thing, and she's looking for real musicianship, real talent, and to her, she found it in these other artists as well. So that's the thread that runs through it. These are all acts that she loves, and she loves them because of their skill, talent, passion, and she's hearing a lot, you know, and she's somebody who saw Thelonious Monk as a very young girl. She saw Thelonious Monk in New York City, in Greenwich Village. And that's something she talks about all the time. So she's, you know, her music history goes, really, it's, I have no idea how old she is. She doesn't give her birth. It's not a traditional kind of biography, you know, I was born in 1920 or whatever. But she's got to be, she was married in 69. So you got to put her at 20 there. So she's got to be getting close to 70, I guess, is the, right? She's got to be in the age range of the guys in Led Zeppelin, for instance. So her musical history goes back to, like she's seen so many acts. She was a music fan as a very young teen, sneaking into the clubs and stuff to see acts that we've all heard of, but we would never have had the chance to see. So it starts off, chapter 1 is she saw Miles Davis, Horace Silver, Ahmad Jamal. You know, she went and saw a rock and roll show starring Little Richard, Chuck Berry, Screaming Jay Hawkins, the Brooklyn Fox. I got to see Thelonious Monk at the 5 Spot in Greenwich Village, and Anita Day and Stan Getz at the Village Vanguard. And this is, she's talking about being 13 and dressing up like an adult to get in to see these places, snuck out in high heels. Or when I was underage, she says. So from a very young age, she was going to shows. She was going to see some really big acts in New York City. And so she says, so when I saw Led Zeppelin in 1973, the time I met Robert Plant's Led Zeppelin, adorable as he was, and despite his band superstar status, I thought he was a bit provincial. He was, after all, far from the north of England. So she's got a, she considers like David Johansen of the New York Dolls the ultimate frontman. So she's got that New York view. Okay, so that said, let's get to Led Zeppelin. Chapter 2 is traveling with Led Zeppelin. She did so 3 times through the years. She saw them early in their career and didn't think much of them. And then, before we get there, there's, I'm going to put on my glasses again. Yeah. If this were on, if I was filming for YouTube, you'd be seeing me in my really cheap Shoppers Drug Mart glasses. But there you go. So about her, let's start with her, about her journalistic, I don't want to say integrity because I don't mean that, but about her journalistic style. She says, I never felt like I was a combatant or reporter. I felt like an ally. The writer Peter Hamill once said the rock journalists were like prosecutors and I was a defense attorney. As far as I was concerned, we were on the same side because our lives have been so changed by the music. However, the drug use and stuff completely confounded her. She missed it. She was not into that stuff, and as such. In 1973, her and her husband's a journalist. She got into it basically because he had a piece in, I want to say New Music Express, but it could be one of the other British ones. I think it actually is one of the other British ones. And he decided to give it, he was busy and couldn't keep going. And so he contacted them and said, listen, I'm going to give this to my wife. And thus started her career. She was, in fact, a teacher by training. We, as in her and her husband, started Rock Scene magazine in 1973 because Richard thought it would be amusing to do magazines of just photos and bitchy, funny captions. Like the I section of Women's Wear Daily. So they have produced their own magazine. She was an editor for Hit Parader. She is a current music editor for Vogue, which gets her involved with photo shoots. And she gets into this, doing a photo shoot for Lady Gaga, and there's so much stuff around her. And she says, she talks about, this is the modern compared to the old. Photo shoots along with recording sessions were fun at first. Now, after been in hundreds of them, the thrill is gone. With women, the hair and makeup take hours. There are racks and racks of clothes. In the 1960s, musicians like Janis Joplin and Jimi Hendrix had style, not stylists. She talks about how, Mick Jagger, David Bowie, Elton John, and in the 80s, Duran Duran had makeup artists on tour. That was about it. Nobody else did. Now everybody does. No, I don't want this one yet. And one last quote, kind of about her. Usually I'm all over the place on these reviews because I don't know what I want. I've at least made notes this time. We'll see how this goes. Oh yeah, so I have no idea what the book is called. There Goes Gravity. I have no idea where that quote comes from. But she talks about. I kept thinking throughout that the better title for this book would be the one for Danny Goldberg's book, Bumping Into Geniuses, because she really seems to have that knack. More so than Goldberg, I really think, bumping into geniuses. And about her career, at the end of the book, about her career, she says, somehow through a series of what Keith Richards would call lucky accidents, I got connected to all the music that was connected. That's kind of her career in a nutshell. She keeps having these lucky accidents. That, that people who work hard, do the right things, smart, work hard, and do the right things tend to have lucky accidents. So don't get me wrong. Oh, lucky bitch. If you do things the right way, if you're in the right place, and if you're smart enough to be in the right place, and you're working hard when you're there, and you're paying attention when you're there, lucky accidents happen. Mostly because they're not really accidents. They just look like accidents from the outside, and often from the inside. Okay, so about Led Zeppelin, I already told you about, she says, she went to see them in 73 in Jacksonville, Florida, for the first time. She got called to do an article for them. She decided to do it. She knew them by reputation only, that is to say the reviews were terrible. They were labeled a derivative, quote, a derivative of a joke. But in Jacksonville, when I saw them perform on stage, I was frankly shocked and surprised to discover I loved their music. I thought it was exciting, complex, and majestic. And she says, I did, honestly. My notes are filled with superlatives. And I should point this out. She mentioned somewhere in here she has 6 storage units of notes, pictures, and films. She films almost everything she does. She goes to parties with people there, and she sticks a camera in the corner and just rolls it. So she has film and like video of all sorts of stuff and film, or she has her tape recorder always with her, and she just turns it on. So she has, and never throws out the tapes. She still has the tapes. Oh, and by the way, she still uses tapes when she does interviews. She doesn't use digital. Anyway, I heard strains of blues and American roots music in combination of everything from 60s Eastern influence British band Kaleidoscope to the acoustic, hippie-ish, incredible string band to Willie Dixon, of course, who they blatantly ripped off. And then, as I mentioned earlier, now nearly 40 years later, Led Zeppelin is universally considered the greatest, one of the most innovative hard rock bands of all time. I got through it that time, innovative. I got it right, the British way. But at that time, it was not the majority opinion. About Jimmy, she says, he looked angelic. He wasn't. About Robert Plant wore a blouse. And it could be called nothing else. About Robert, she says his charm was evident, and Jimmy, he would prove to be the most elusive, and this is the most interesting quote in the entire book. Jimmy would prove the most elusive and mysterious of the two, and because it really was Jimmy's band to begin with, I initially underestimated Robert. 40 years later, Robert would wind up with all the power. That's a good point. By the way, she was invited to go to the Celebration Day concert. She chose not to. Decided she had seen enough of the old Iraqs trying to relive their glory years, and as she saw them so many times in their glory years, she had no interest in seeing them now. So that's it really doesn't come up much. About Jimmy, interesting about them being signed, she says Ahmet Erdogan told me I knew Jimmy Page and he was a genius and would be the driving force of the group. We were happy to sign them before we heard any music. And Jimmy's off. A theme throughout as well with the Led Zeppelin guys is if we all know they complain about how they're treated in the press. And no, I'm not going to bother that one. There's a story. I'm going to finish this off with a story that she tells. Basically about Jimmy ranting at a reporter on the plane, and I'll trim it down and cut it so I'm not spoiling everything. But she's she is a John Bonham fan. Of John Bonham, she says, drunk, he was a madman. At the first sign of temper, everybody got out of the way. But sober to me, he was sweetheart, articulate, and a gentleman. He lit my cigarettes, opened car doors for me, and once showed me to my hotel room wearing a suit and tie for one of the few interviews he ever did. It's hard to imagine now, when drummers sit high on the stage, on setups that resemble spaceships, but in those early days, Bonzo didn't even have a drum riser. It's a theme in Led Zeppelin books, isn't it? That Bonzo is the beast, he's this madman, but everybody loves him. He's a charming scalawag. I don't understand. To be honest with you, I don't understand it. When I read about things that he did, I often think that I wouldn't like this man. I have no interest in knowing him. Other people, I'd love to meet these guys. I have no interest. Not that I mean, obviously, but if I could turn back time, sort of thing. John Bonham's not the guy I'd decide to meet. But that's a constant theme that runs throughout the books. Almost any book, and somebody talks about him, is how sweet a guy he really was. It really is a yin-yang with him, isn't it? One of my favorite Bonzo stories, years and years, I've told this story for years to people, is him ranting after after a show or before a show in the dressing room, Playboy had done its music poll, and Karen Carpenter had won Drummer of the Year. And so she was there on that incident. In 1975, before the band was due to go on stage at Chicago Stadium, Bonzo was roaring mad and flinging furniture in the band's dressing room. I'd like to have it publicized that I came in after Karen Carpenter in a Playboy drummer poll, he bellowed. She couldn't last 10 minutes with a Zeppelin number, which is how I've heard the story. But later that night, he sat in a booth at the bistro with Robert and Jimmy stood around listening to whispered propositions. Bonzo talked quietly to me. You know, my wife is expecting again in July. She's really terrific, the type of lady that when you walk into the house, she comes right out with a cup of tea or a drink or a sandwich. We met when we were 16, got married at 17. I was a carpenter for a few years. I got up at 7 in the morning, then changed my clothes in the van on the way to gigs at night. How do you think I feel not being taken seriously? Coming in after Karen Carpenter in the Playboy poll. Karen Carpenter. What a load of shit. And on the same subject, Ian Stewart told him, everything with Zeppelin rocks and rolls. That's because Bonham, who's probably the best drummer in rock and roll, will always see to that. By the way, there's really no John Paul Jones in here, and she may just not have had access to John Paul Jones, but there's not a lot. So there's a lot. You get the flavor, right, of how she talks. She was there, she saw it, she had made notes, she was recording, and she has gone back to write this book and quoted, got the notes right, etc., etc. And it is an interesting looking back at John Bonham talking about not being taken seriously, as now he is almost universally considered the greatest rock and roll drummer. And some people will argue for Neil Peart, and some will argue for Keith Moon, but I don't think anybody really argues it's just laying down a groove, and putting the band in the pocket. There's anybody better than Bonham? I don't think anybody would argue that. You can argue that Moon did different things, and he did them in a way that made him better, or that Peart, as a technician, is so good that it overrides, overrides Bonham on the groove issue. But at the end of the day, nobody argues that anybody could lay down a groove, just better. And Ian Stewart's right. Everything with Led Zeppelin, and something I've grown to appreciate more and more over the years, everything with Led Zeppelin starts with that groove. Everything starts with those drums. And he was never, no matter how screwed, we hear how fucked up he was. I'm going to have to put an adult warning on this now. We hear how screwed up he was. We hear that, even in the 79-80s, 79-80 area, he was on heroin. But he never really faltered in terms of just being the powerhouse behind the band. And in much the way that Jimmy did falter. Jimmy was having an awful time playing at times, and even as early as 77. But Bonzo never really did. Anyway, one other one I wanted to talk about, one other part of this I wanted to talk about briefly. And I think I'm going to end up repeating myself on this, but she set up, this is the famous picture of the band standing along the wing of the plane, the Starship. Robert's got his arms outstretched. She set up the picture. It was taken by Bob Gruen, and I mentioned last week Bob Gruen has a show in New York City right now, rock photography show. He's good friends with Lisa. He's one of the people who traveled with her often, and she would often take a picture of that, take a picture of this, come on with me, I want you to get this. So about that picture, she says, I cajoled the band into lining up by the wing so that Bob Gruen could take a photograph that would eventually become a postcard. Robert Plant's shirt was, as usual, unbuttoned, so sadly it was John Paul Jones. Anyway, but later on, remember I mentioned earlier the bit about in the 60s, musicians like Janis Joplin and Jimi Hendrix had stylists. On the same paragraph, she talks about, she makes the line. I spent last weekend wiring up this house for on-air buttons. I have read on it, but the dog, you think the dog gets it? It's unbelievable. Scottish jog. My apologies. Anyway, so yeah, she's talking about. I'd tell the New York Dolls, for instance, to pose in front of Fredericks, a Hollywood lingerie emporium on Hollywood Boulevard. Bob Gruen took pictures. I lined Led Zeppelin, quote, I lined Led Zeppelin up alongside the wing of their private jet at Teterboro Airport in New Jersey. Bob Gruen took pictures. I find it hilarious that these photos, done on the fly in 10 minutes, are now considered iconic. At the end of the 20th century, when I became involved with Vanity Fair photo shoots, I likened my job to that of fluffer on a porn set, and so on. So she's talking about how much different it is now there. But, you know, she just lined them up, took the shot, and there it was. So this one last story, which actually tells a lot about the various people in the band, and the fabric of what it was like. And it's a bit longer, so I'm going to try and do some ellipses in here, but I haven't plotted it out, so we'll see how it goes. On January 31st, on the plane to the show in Detroit, Jimmy argued with a reporter from the London Daily Express. The reporter wore an ascot, smirked, and said to Jimmy, "You're not supposed to make intelligent remarks." Jimmy, who was stoned and drinking Jack Daniels, was exasperated. "Listen," he said, "I don't just jump up and down on stage. I compose. I've done session work." Bonzo muttered, "Uh-oh. I know what he's like when he gets like this. He's going to slug somebody." Jimmy was incredulous. "Can you believe that man referred to my guitar playing as a trade?" During Bonzo's drum solo, the other band went to the dressing room. The reporter tried to follow, but was stopped by Richard Cole, who said the band was having a meeting. The reporter was enraged. "I write for 10 million people, and I won't have you humiliate me in front of my staff." Member of his staff, a buxom blonde woman, swathed in rabbit fur. On the way back to the plane, the reporter demanded the radio be turned off in the car. "After 2 hours of that Led Zeppelin record, I can't stand anymore." Back on the plane, people whispered in groups in twos and threes. Jimmy, who'd been huddled under a red blanket, suddenly came to life and got right back into the argument. "You don't want to know about my music," Jimmy yelled. "All you care about are the financial grosses and the interior of the plane. You're a communist." Meanwhile, Robert was muttering under his breath, "I don't think he's such a bad bloke. 10 million people read the paper. Me mum and dad read the paper. The singer was good." Jimmy started yelling at the way he voted in the last election. Someone threw a drink at the reporter. The reporter became belligerent, and then suddenly Richard Cole stood in the aisle holding a gun. "I've never seen a real gun before. We're at 25,000 feet in the air." I cowered in my seat, nervous glances all around. Two of the band's security guys walked over and stood menacingly next to Richard, who threatened the porter with his silent stare. "For Christ's sake," Bonzo yelled from the front of the plane, "will you all shut up? I'm trying to get some sleep." So there's a little tidbit into the life of Led Zeppelin, of the kind you don't usually see, and a good story all around. And that's, look, at the end of the day, here's what I'm going to say about this book. It's really well written. She's a good writer. Better at the beginning than at the end. If you're a hip hop / Gaga / Michael Jackson fan, then better at the end than the beginning, probably. I mean, that's it. She's seen so many people. She's been so many places. She's been involved in scenes that have changed the music that we listen to. She's been involved in scenes that changed the society we listen to. And she recorded it all. And she reports on it all. And she lightly goes through this book, tells the story. It's not so much her story. I mean, it obviously is told from her point of view. But it's not, I was born here, I did this, I did that sort of thing. It's her professional story, I guess, is the best way of putting this. And so it was an enjoyable read. I really did enjoy it. Got through it in about 4 days, by the way. And this is not small. And I wonder if it will be, this is a fairly large page book, the one they sent me. This is a 6x9 book. If you know books at all, it's larger. It's more like a trade paperback, I think they call it. Smaller than a hardback, larger than a pocket paperback type of thing. 368 pages. So thank you for Penguin for sending it, and I'm going to show it to the microphone again. It was very good. I would recommend it, unless you're going specifically for, she talks about Led Zeppelin, or she talks about the Rolling Stones. In which case, it's probably not enough meat there for the one band in specific, or at least let's say there's not enough meat there. There's probably not enough meat there if you're just there for the one band. But looking at it for Led Zeppelin, I enjoyed it enough. All right, so that's it. Next week will be Dave Lewis right here. It's almost 100%. But again, it should have happened today. Again, I got bumped. Remember last week he bumped me for Glenn Hughes, or 2 weeks ago. This week, I believe it's some guy who played tambourine on stage with Robert during a bachelor party in Ipswich in 1993. But hey, he's got to do his interviews. No, I don't know why. He is busy right now putting out the next edition. It sounds like he legitimately wants to come on. I'm getting emails from him periodically saying, okay, we've got to make this happen. We've got to make this happen. So next week is supposed to be on. I won't know for sure until probably later this week. But yeah, I'm expecting Dave Lewis next week. Look forward to Dave Lewis next week. And that's it for Ramble On Radio, episode number 55. Check rambleonradio.com for notes on this week's podcast, Led Zeppelin news and reviews, and any links mentioned in today's podcast. Follow Ramble On Radio on Facebook, Google+, and at Ramble On Blog on Twitter. You can subscribe to Ramble On Radio through iTunes. If you go to iTunes, leave a review. Listen on Spreaker, and be sure to follow me on Spreaker. Spreaker, by the way, Spreaker.com. Be sure to follow Ramble On Radio or me, I'm not sure which it is, on Spreaker. And check out I Am Brian Dammit on YouTube. So thanks for listening to Ramble On Radio. This is A. Chili's Gardener signing off from episode number 55.
Mythological hero Achilles.
Switch off the internet.
Pray.
I say what? Ho, this is Brian. Call me A. Chili's Gardener, coming to you from Ramble On Tower's Dungeon Studio in scenic Hespeler, Ontario. And you are listening to Ramble On Radio, episode number 55, the Big Double Nickel. Ramble On Radio is the only dedicated Led Zeppelin podcast on this or any other known internets. Be sure to go to rambleonradio.com for all your Led Zeppelin news, any links I might mention during the show. You can subscribe to Ramble On Radio through iTunes, and if you go to iTunes, leave a review. There's a chance to leave a review, or if you subscribe through iTunes, go over, leave a review. It helps put us on it bumps you up the listing when people search. You can listen on Spreaker, and be sure to follow Ramble On Radio on Spreaker. Same kind of thing. More people follow, the more it's not listens that they kind of track, it's follows. And check it out at I Am Brian Dammit on YouTube. Follow Ramble On Radio on Facebook, Google+, and Ramble On Blog on Twitter. And that's right, I said it's A. Chili's Gardener, the great penguin god with the bad flipper. That intro piece, you heard it, the intro piece was from Wheel of Fortune last week when Indiana University freshman Julian Batts, and if you're not in the U.S., this confuses people. A freshman is a first-year student. It goes freshman, sophomore, junior, senior. That's first, second, third, and fourth year. And so Indiana University freshman Julian Batts, he had all the tiles turned, the entire puzzle solved. It was no letters left to turn. He had picked up $1 million tile off the wheel, another one for a trip to London, and all he had to do was read the puzzle, and he got it wrong. It was mythological hero Achilles. You heard it. You heard the beginning. If you didn't, go back to the beginning when this is over. Don't stop now, but go back to listen to the beginning again. He pronounced it Achilles, and he got the big buzzer instead of the $1 million and the trip to London. Which proves once and for all, this proves beyond a shadow of a doubt, listen to Led Zeppelin, win $1 million. It's that simple. That is the lesson in this. There's $1 million out there to be won if only you're a Led Zeppelin fan. Because a Led Zeppelin fan would never, ever, ever have gotten that one wrong. Quite frankly, a university student shouldn't have either. But, you got to give some allowances for nerves, I think. And underplaying that, and the rest of what you heard in the intro, was Robert Plant this Sunday at the Silhillians Sports Club. And it was, I have no idea I've seen that clip, and that's all I've seen on it. It's not like the charity thing at the church last week when there was some articles and whatnot about what it was. He just seemed to be in the Midlands and got up and did some songs. And he was performed "Satan, Your Kingdom Must Come Down" there. That's the only clip I've seen, is that 1 minute that you heard. But that is that. That.
Song.
Oh, that'd be a good idea, yeah.
Mythological hero Achilles. Okay. Shelby.
I'll solve.
Yeah.
Mythological hero Achilles.
Yeah, that's it.
Your kingdom must come down. Saying your kingdom must come down. I heard the voice of Jesus cry. Say, your kingdom must come down.
That was what that was. Okay, so this week, if you haven't already got it, or if you haven't heard, the Led Zeppelin released "Good Times, Bad Times" / Communication Breakdown from the Paris Olympia in 1969. This is one of the bonus tracks from the first album, and they've pre-released it. They've released it ahead of the album as a single, I guess. That was this week. It's available to download on iTunes. It's available to download on Amazon. You can listen to it if you're a Spotify. You can find it. And what's happening is when you check the pre-order on iTunes, it gives the listing of the songs, but it does not have the track, the length of the tracks, except one on each album right now. On the first album, it is this track, this bonus track. It's got the time for it.